Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be going through a project that is based on Spark, DBT, and a cloud provider. This is as decided by the community, and you can see how the community voted in the last week. We had 108 votes, of which 43 of them voted that we go for Spark, DBT, and any other cloud platform. As a runner-up, we have a data warehousing project with best practices following up with 38%, Snowflake 16%, and Apache Flink streaming project 4%. I have decided that we're going to be going with the winner of this poll, which is the Spark, DBT, and any cloud platform project. So let's go through the system architecture as decided. We will be adopting the medallion architecture for this project. The medallion architecture allows us to have 3 layers of transformation: the bronze layer, the silver, as well as the gold. In the bronze layer, the data that are coming into the system are left as is and uncut, while in the silver layer, a level of transformation has taken place and some of the data might have been changed, transformed, or even removed from the system. In the gold layer, this is where we have all the data that are ready to be consumed by different business intelligence units, different users, as well as maybe for analytics purposes, even for consumers like data scientists that want to develop data science and machine learning algorithms. Now, according to this project, we will be using Azure Data Factory, Azure Databricks, DBT, and a lot of Gen 2 services in the ADLS section. So this project is majorly on the Azure cloud, and we'll try as much as possible to keep it at that. If you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and also turn on the notification bell so you can be the first person to get notified once there's a new video released. So let's get into the project and let's get started. If you do not have an account, I would really recommend you go on Google and search for Azure free account. If you go for Azure free account, you have access to a free account, which gives you access to free $200 and Azure credit, and you can use 55 services for free, and it's usually for 12 months. So if that is something that you want to consider, I will really recommend and suggest that you go and start free right now. Okay, I'll be using my brother's account. It's a free account. He opened it a couple of days ago, and that's the one I'll be using. Okay, so now to get started, I'm going to start by creating a resource. So the resource group that we're going to be creating, start with the resource groups. So you can search from here, or you can select from the list of Azure services that is listed on the UI for you. I'll be clicking on the resource group here, and I have a couple of resource groups currently here, and I'll just click on create to create a new one. So the subscription that is currently having is Azure for Students. So if you are using the free account, you have Azure free subscription here. So it's using Azure for Students. So but the resource group that is going to be creating, I'll call this medallion Spark DBT resource group. Okay, now it looks like this resource group is okay, and right now we're in the East US, so I'll be selecting something very close to me, something around UK South, if that's okay, to Europe. So you can choose anyone that is closer to you, and if you have any resource constraint and you cannot create any of the services, I'll really recommend you change the resource group region, or whatever resource that you're going to be using. You can choose any resource group and the region for that. So I'll be using UK South for that. And in next, I click on the next and the tags section. So I don't have any tags. It's just to review and create. And after the validation is passed, if you want to download the template for automation with something like Terraform, you can download it from here, but I don't need that as of this moment because it is out of scope of this video. So I'll just click on create. Okay. So right now, if you notice, we have a medallion Spark DBT resource group that is available for us. Now, the next thing I want to do is to create a Gen 2 ADLS, Azure Data Lake service, for storing our data. So I'm going to come in here, I'll search for Gen 2. Okay, which is the storage account, or you search for storage accounts if that's okay for you. Storage accounts. So if you select this, you have access to the ones that have been previously created. So I'll just create a new one. I'll call this medallion. It's using the resource group that I previously created. So I'll be selecting the medallion Spark DBT resource group, and the storage account name is going to be called, so let's call it medallion. I'm choosing the medallion architecture, so that's the reason why I'm using the medallion name. So I'll be using the medallion architecture, which simply is the bronze, silver, and gold layer. So the bronze layer, like I said, is usually for raw data. Silver is for fine-tuned data, but it can be consumed by some people, some analytics and data scientists, if you want. But the gold layer is where the refined data and everything is more in a presentable format. It could be data marts, it could be multiple services that are going to be consuming from there. But it's more like a very refined data at that point. So yeah, so for the storage account, so I'm going to say medallion storage. So it can only contain letters and numbers. I'll just say medallion storage account. Maybe medallion SA. Okay, that's my storage account. So the region is going to be UK South, and I'll be using the standard. Okay, the geo redundancies by default. Then in here, I'll be just enabling the hierarchical namespace, which is complementing the ADLS Gen 2 endpoints for enabling file and directory semantics. Well, that's English, but usually you have access to the files and directory. So just where you have it in your my documents on your system, where you have your folders and the files structured out in hierarchical order. That's the way it usually is. So I'll be leaving the rest as it is. Then I click on network. I should enable access to public access from all network. The data protection is going to be as it is. I'll just click on next, no encryption as it is by default. I'll leave it. Then we just wait for the validation to be done, and I'll click on create. Now, the storage account is going to be created, and this is where we're going to be having the multiple storage, whether it's bronze layer, the silver layer, or the gold layer. That's where we're going to be putting them in our storage account. So I just wait a couple of seconds for the storage deployment to be done. Once it is done, we switch over to that. Okay, so the deployment is done. I can go to the resource. Now, going to the resource, I have access to all of this on the left, and some of the keys and shortcuts on the right here. So, but on the left, you can see the data storage. I'll be clicking on the containers in there. So I don't have any container right now, so I'll be creating one. So I'll start with the bronze, and then the silver, and finally the gold. Okay, now these are the three layers that we're going to be having. So whatever data that we're creating or that is coming into the system will be landing into the bronze layer. From there, we process it into the silver layer, and then we process finally into the gold. Okay, now once this is done, the next thing is to create a data factory. So I'm going to come in here and search for data factory. Okay, and you can click on data factories in here. Now I have one in here, but I'll just create a new one. So I'll create a new one. I'll be selecting the medallion Spark DBT resource group, and I'll call it medallion ADF. Okay. Then next, the Git configuration is by default. Even though we're not going to be using it, we just leave it as we configure it later. The networking is going to be a public endpoint. We leave it at that. Advanced, no. Tags, no. Review and create, and that's it. Boom. We just wait a few seconds for the data factory also to be created as well before we continue. Okay, the deployment is succeed. I click on go to resource, and we can view what we have in our data factory. I'm not going to be launching the data factory studio right now, so I need one other thing. It's called Key Vault. So I can search for Key Vault in here. Key Vault. So the Key Vault is where I'll be storing all my keys and secrets. So I don't want to be copying every now and then, so I can just easily paste data into my secrets, and I can reuse it in my Databricks by the time we get to the Databricks section. So we don't have to, recopy every time, expose our keys, as it is going to be more like in a production environment. Okay. So I select the Key Vault. Now I have a Key Vault in here, so I'll just create a new one. Creating a new one, I'm going to be selecting the resource group medallion Spark DBT RG. Then the Key Vault name is going to be medallion Spark. I'll call it KV. Okay. Now the region is going to be UK South. All right. The pricing here is going to be standard. I'll just leave it at that. Then next, access configuration. So I can use the RBAC, the role-based access control, but I can leave it as a Vault access policy, where you can select a user. So if you don't have it in here, so I think it is best to select something like this, so you can fine grain and select the policy that you want for every particular user that is going to be assigned to. So I already created a user, but if you want to create a new user, you can use this button. And if you want, you can use a template in here. Just select the properties that you're going to be attaching to a particular user in here, and then just the principal is going to be, okay, let's say I select all of this, for instance. The principal is going to be the applications that are going to be accessing this in this particular Key Vault. So you can, for instance, if you have Databricks, you can add it in here. Databricks resource provider can be added to this list. And if you have any other ones, maybe Gen 2 Storage Lake is going to be accessing the Key Vault for some reasons, you can add it in here, and any other service. So if you have any application as well, which is fine, just review and create, and that's how I created this user. And if you click on this user and you click on edit, you can see the properties and permissions that were given to this particular user. I don't need any cryptographic operations, as well as privileged key operations and secret key operations. I don't need any of them. I only need the key, secret, the certificate, as well as the rotation policy operation. Those are the four things that are attached to that particular user. Now, if you click on the review and create, you can see all of them in here, but I'll not be doing that right now. And once that is done, I'll just review, I'll just next. Let's see, am I missing anything here? So we have the resource access, virtual machine, unknown. Resource manager for template deployment, no. Disk encryption, no, it's fine. We just click on next. Now, allow access from all networks. I'll be leaving it at that. The tax is free, review and create, and once it is validated, we can click on create. So it takes a few seconds as well to finish the deployment, and once that is done, we can continue. Okay. Now the deployment is done, so let's switch over to our data factory, because that's where the major work is. So I'll be selecting the medallion ADF in here, and I'll be selecting the launch studio. So this is going to launch the Azure Data Factory for me. Okay, so right now we are in the Azure Data Factory page. Now we can start with the one on the left. So we have the home, which is the landing page, of course. Author is where we're going to be creating our pipeline, data sets, and the rest in here. Monitor is where we can do the monitoring of the pipelines, the triggers, the change data capture, and the rest here. But right now we are going to be focusing on two things, the author section and the manage section. Now we start with the manage section, because what we want to do is have access to our Gen 2 Lake service, as well as our database, which we'll be creating shortly. So we don't have a database right now, and we don't have any data as well. So let's do that before we continue to Azure Data Factory and get cracking. Okay, now going into this guy, we are going to do one last thing in here. So you can search for SQL databases. SQL database, this is Azure SQL. Now mind you, this is using SQL Server command. So if you have background in Postgres or any other languages, like any other database scripting language, like maybe MySQL or maybe MariaDB or something like that, some of the syntax might have to be fine-tuned. But right now we are using SQL Server dialect. as the language. Okay. Now I'll be creating a new database. I click on this and then we can create a new database. Okay. So creating a new database. So I'll be selecting the resource group as the medallion Spark DBT resource group. Okay. Now the database name. All right. So this is very expensive. So what I'm going to do right now is $396. So what I'm going to do basically is to remove the one that I currently have on the system. So I'll just delete this database. Okay. I'll just delete it. Just delete. Okay. It takes a few seconds to be completed. And once it is done, we can continue. Now, as usual, a database resides on a particular server. So we can come in here and search for SQL Server. You have SQL servers in here. So I currently have one server in here sitting pretty nicely in here. So if you want, I can delete this and we can create a new one. Or let me see if there's anything that we can adjust in here. So basically, I just created this server on the fly. I think I'll just maybe delete this. Let's delete it. Yeah, let's delete it. Skip feedback. We're going to create a new one eventually. So just delete this and delete. Okay. I don't have anything important on it, so I just delete that. Okay. So I close this, going to SQL Server, refresh. So yeah, our SQL Server is deleted as well as the database itself. So we can go back into our SQL database in here. So let's create a new SQL database. All right. So right now I have access to 32 gig free of data and 32 gig free of backup storage. So I'll be applying this offer so I don't pay so much on that. So right now I'll be selecting the medallion Spark DBT. The database name is going to be code with you, and I'll call the database name. I'll say medallion DB. Okay, maybe I'll say dev because this is semi-production ready really. So we don't have a server right now, so we create a new server. So the server is going to be code with you, medallion DB. All right. So the location is going to be in the UK South. Where is it? UK South. Show yourself. I can't find it. Okay. UK. Yeah, UK South. Okay. Now the authentication is going to be like that, but I'll be using the SQL authentication. So I'll be having the server admin as my, in fact, I'll be using code with you as the admin login, and the password is going to be something that I create, and I'm not going to be sharing that with you. Okay. All right. So you can use your own password as well and don't share with me. Okay. Thank you very much. Now the password matches and I can click on OK. Now this creates a server for us on the fly, and I know the username is code with you and the password is something that I'm not going to be telling you. Okay. Now, yeah, behavior when the free offer is reached. I want you to auto pause the DB until the next month, and it's fine. I'll just click on networking. Now, connectivity method. Now, I don't need, there's going to be a public endpoint access. So I need people to be able to access this. Not everybody, it's just me alone, of course. I'll be deleting this after this video so nobody can access this DB as well. But it's okay. Firewall rules there. No need for that. As well as the connection policy. It's okay. I'll just click on next as my security. I don't need the defender for SQL. No ledger, server identity, no, and the rest is going to be left as default. Additional settings. Now, this is very important. At the data source level, I want this to be populated with AdventureWorks data that's already more like a sample database. So you need to select the sample database for AdventureWorks to be added to your system. If you don't select that, that means you'll have to maybe download AdventureWorks by yourself and then populate your DB with it if you want. But I think that's a stressful way of putting it. So if you want, I think it's best to just use a sample, and it gives you the latest adventure works in the system. You have all the data, sitting there pretty nicely once it is done. So I just click on the sample, and it gives us adventure works LT. I'll just click on OK, and yeah, the next tags is free, and the review and create. So I don't have any cost, it's free of charge. And this is important. If you select, just like I had it before, if you have your first 32 gig, you have it for free, but subsequently you have to be paying. Right now I had $395 to be paying. I can't be paying something like that for just a single video, and all that. So I think it's okay. If it is something that is more like production ready, then it's okay. Just click on create. All right, so the deployment is in progress. We just wait a few more seconds for the deployment to be done, and we can get cracking. Okay, the resource deployment is complete, and we can go to the resource now. So let's double check if the data is automatically populated and we have access to it. So if I click on the query editor with the preview, it recognizes my username, so I can just type in my password. So my password does, and it says could not log in with this IP address. So I just need to allow it, and it's allowed for access. So I'll just click on OK and log in again. So right now I have access to this, and if you look at the tables, I drop it down, you can see all of the tables in here. So if I select start from address, for instance, and I run this, you can see that I have customer address sitting pretty nicely in here. And for the customer address as well, customer address, I can, okay, I'll just remove this, and I'll remove the last one here. I'll run it again, and you can see the customer address sitting there pretty nicely. We have the product as well, and just to show you that the data has been populated for us, we don't need to write any scripts to or some fake data or synthetic data to be added to it. This is AdventureWorks, and it has some sales information, the customer information, as well as the product information. So this works for us. But what we want to do basically is I want to automate the process so I can automatically get the data into our bronze layer, from there to silver, then gold. Okay, how do we do this? So we're going to start with the ADF. So the ADF is going to go into this database on our server and fetch the table names in there. So each of these tables are going to be looped through, and then we are going to dump all of this data into our bronze as our first level. Now, once data gets into our bronze layer, we are going to have them as more like normal files. Okay, then in our in the second layer, which is going to be our silver and gold, and the second and the third, they are going to be more like a data files there. We're going to store them as package files at that point, but initially they're also going to be stored as package, which is going to be our initial files in the bronze layer. So let me show you what I mean, so it's a little bit clearer if I show you. Okay, so right now what we're doing basically is we have all of these tables in here. So if you want to get all of the tables, you can get them this guy. I'll just copy this, and I'll put this as like that, and that will be information underscore schema. Okay, yeah, all right. So these are the tables that I have. So this is the schema name and the table name. Okay, so you can see that we have, let me see if I can expand this a little bit. Okay, maybe not. So I have the table catalog, the table schema, table name, and table type. And you can see each of the data that is here. But what we want to focus on are the ones that are in this sales LT schema. We don't need the DBO, which is fine. This is more like a added to it automatically. So we just focus on this, and we focus on the tables. We don't need the view as well. Okay, So if you want, you can add the views, but for now we just exclude those ones. So we just say where the table schema is equals to, okay, sales LT, and table type is equal to base table. Okay, if we run this again, we have something more fine-tuned, which is this. So we can use this to get all the table names in there, and based on this we can feed that with dynamic query in our Azure Data Factory. All right, let's switch over to Azure Factory and let's get cracking with that. So in our Azure Factory in here, we need to create a link service that is going to be connecting to our SQL server, and we can, based on that, create a data set. Okay, so let's create a new one. The way I got in here by clicking on the manage on the left on the sidebar here and clicking on the linked service. So if you click on plus and you come to the Azure tabs, you can type in SQL, and you have access to SQL database here. If you click on continue, it's going to be Azure SQL database, whatever name you call it. I'll leave it at that. And auto-resolve runtime integration from Azure subscription. I'll select the subscription. Okay, the server name is going to be the medallion DB. The database name is going to be code with you medallion DB dev. All right, then the username is going to be code with you. The password is going to be what I can, I'm the only one that added that. Okay, once that is done, let's test the connection. Connection failed. What's the error? It says user code with you, client IP is not allowed. So I think we need to create a firewall that allows this. Okay, so let's fix that. I'm just going to click on configure, and we have access in here. It says public network access is selected network. So what I'm going to do, so I just need to add I just scroll down and allow Azure services and resource access to this server, and I just click on that and I click on save. Once that is done, we can go back into our medallion here and test it again. Test connection. Should have access now. Okay, connection is successful, and I click on create. All right, now we have a link access from our data factory to Azure. Right now we also need access to where we're going to be writing and dumping data into on our Gen 2 lake service. So which is here, we just come in here and select the ADLS Gen 2, continue, and I can leave it as that, and in here I'll just select that, the subscription. The storage account name is going to be the medallion storage account, and then the file path we're going to be storing data into is going to be, I'll just call it bronze. Okay, and we can test the connection. It's successful. All right, we create. Okay, good. Now we can go back into the author section and create our first pipeline. Okay, so let's create a new pipeline. Now in our pipeline, I'll just minimize this for now. In our pipeline, we are going to have what is going to be bringing data up for us. For that, we need a data set. So let's create a new data set. Now this data set is going to be the one reading the data from our Azure database into our data factory. Okay, so I'll just click on this and I'll just say SQL, and we have Azure SQL. I'll continue. Now the link service is this one, and I'll call this maybe tables query or something like that, something to fetch all of the queries. But right here we cannot select just a single table, because what we want to do is get all of the tables. So right now I'll leave everything in here as it is, and I'll click on OK. Now this seems funny, but this is how we're going to be doing, because we want to dynamically assign the table names into this guy. Okay, so right now we leave the tables query as it is. Now let's go into our pipeline and bring in our lookup that is going to be fetching all of this data for us. So we can either come in here and search for lookup, okay, or you can just go into the general section and drag lookup into the plane. Okay, so in our lookup, we are going to have some settings in here. So, but for now, if we click on the settings tab, now I don't need the first row only. I need multiple records. So if it's just a single record that I need, you can select the first row only, but I don't need that. I need the entire thing. So we have a data set, which is where the data is going to be coming from. But right now we don't have anything selected for our table query. So what we need to do is have a query that is going to be getting data for us. I think I copied that earlier, but for some reasons I've overwritten that. So what we're going to do is we can either go back into our DB or just take our chances and write it in here. Select stuff from I'll just get the database name. Maybe I'll just quickly go back into our SQL database because I can't recall the exact query database name and all that. Okay, just go in here and we can select stuff from the database name. I'll just copy this guy and I'll put it in here, .information schema.tables. Okay, and we just I'll reduce this a little bit. So where the table schema equals to sales LT and table type equals to base table. Okay, so let's see if this works. I think it does, and we can just select this. I'll just copy that and go into our data factory. I'll paste this in here. So right now, if you preview the data, let's see what we have. All right, so we have all of these: table catalog, table schema, table name, and table type. Okay, so we can use this to get started and load data into our data set. So what we're going to be doing is, once we have this, the next thing is going to be where the data is going to be going to. So the data is going to be going into our DB table. So, okay. So I have it as a tables query. So this lookup is fine. Now, each of these records that are being populated into from our lookup, from the base table query in here, what we want to do is we want to loop through each of them, and for each of them we want to dump them into our bronze layer. So we come in here and we can search for each. Okay, so for each is going to iterate through each of the items in there, and I can select this in there, and I'll select this for each of the activities. Now the first thing we want to do is copy the data that is coming into the system. Okay, so I can search in here and go into the move and transform for copy data. Now you can add many logic as well as possible, as much as possible in here, but right now just keep it simple. We have our copy data, which is this. We just need to configure the source. The source is going to be the tables query that is coming in. Let's see our pipeline in here. So if you click on the for each here, we have the settings. Now the items that will be coming into the lookup, before we configure what is inside the for each, we need to add a dynamic content in here. So we have the let's see what we have. I'll just minimize this for now. We have the lookup. I'll change the name to fetch all tables. Okay, so that will be the name. And once you get into the for each, we have the settings, and the items are going to be fetch all tables return value. So this is not the pipeline value, but the value itself. Okay, and yeah, we just use that. Now for each of the items that is now coming in as the table output value, we want to pick each of them and dump them into our bronze layer. Okay, so right now we have this coming in, and if you preview the data, we can't because we don't have anything assigned to that yet. For us to be able to work with this, we can use the table query as well, but what we need to do is have a separate data set that is going to be feeding data from this table query. So I'm going to just create a new data set here. I'll call it still the same SQL, and I'll select that and continue. And inside here, I'll be selecting the SQL table instead of the data table that we have earlier, the table list. So I'll just selecting this as my SQL table and selecting that. There's no need for tables as well. I'll click on OK. Now this SQL table is the one that we're going to be feeding from when we are copying. Okay, so I'll select this as my SQL table, but in here we just need to add a parameter to specify the schema as well as the table name. So I'm going to have the schema name and the table name. Okay, now these two guys are the ones that are going to be passing each of the records that are coming in from our table query into our SQL. So we can use this and dump them into our bronze layer. Okay, so coming back to this, yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, we're good. So we just go back into the pipeline, select this, and instead of this, we just have what's the name? SQL table. So we have the schema name as well as the table name. So since we are not add coding the schema name and the table name, we need to add them as dynamic content. So I'll select this, and it says for each of the item, we will be selecting the, if you can recall, in our DB, we have the table schema and we have the table name. Okay, so we have the table underscore schema, and I'll click on OK. And for the table name, I'll come in here for each again, and I'll select the table underscore name, which is what is here. I'll select OK. Now we have access to the table that are coming in from our pipeline. Once we fetch all of them, we pass them into our for each, and for each is going to loop through each of these activities and send them into our source. The source is going to transfer them to the sink. So now let's configure the sink. Yeah, I think everything is fine here. We select the sink. Now the sink is where we are going to be sending data to. We don't have where that is going to be done right now. So let's create a data set for that. So I'll be selecting here, and I'll be selecting the Gen 2 lake storage, and that will be the Parquet file that we're going to be sending to that. So this will be the Parquet file output. Okay, and then in the lake service, I'll be selecting the data lake storage. I'll leave it as this, but right now we need to pass in the directory as well as the file name. So I'll leave it as that for now, and then we can parameterize this as well. So this is going to be taking the parameter of the folder name, folder name, and I'll call this the file path. Okay. Maybe the file name. Okay, so these are the two things that this requires as parameters, and we have access to our data lake from here. Now in our file path, we are going to be passing that as dynamic content. So we have the folder name as our directory, which is okay, and for the, I'll just minimize this. For the file name, we'll be passing the file name that is coming into the system as a parameter there. So right now we leave it as a compression of Snappy, but if you want, you can use gzip or the ISO compression tag. I'll leave Snappy in there, and then this is how we configure the parameters. Okay, now we can now use this Parquet file output as our output section in the sink. So I'll be selecting Parquet file output, and it's asking me for the folder name as well as the file name. Now, for us to configure the file name and the folder name, we need to understand what the final output is going to be looking like. So based on what we have in each of these records, if you look at the, say for customer, for instance, I'll just, let's say we have select star from customer, and I run this. Okay, you can see that we have we have some records in here, but what we want to do basically is group all of these as a single entity in our bronze layer. So the data that we're bringing the data in is going to be where the data is going to be sitting in, and the file name is going to be separate. Okay, so what I mean basically is I'm going to be having a single date as a, let's say, format date time. I'll be using the date time of current date, which is the UTC now, and I'll be formatting that as the year, month, and day. If you like, you can use day, month, and year. It doesn't really matter, but for consistency's sake, you can use the year, month, or day, or you can also add something like this if that's what you prefer. Okay, so I'll select that, and that will be my folder name. Now for the file name, we need to concatenate the schema name as well as the table name to create an output there. So I'm going to have the table schema, which is this, and then I'm going to be having a join with because this is going to be a concat function. Okay, I'm going to be joining this as well with the item.table name. Okay, then finally I'll be joining this with .parquet because that's the final extension that we're going to be storing it as. So it's going to be schema name dot table name dot parquet. Yeah, so if we have multiple schemas or the same table name in multiple schemas, the schema name is going to differentiate each of them as a separate entity. Okay, so I'll select that, and once that is done, I'll leave the copy behavior as it is, and every other thing is going to be left as it is. So in here, I'll just come into the I'll leave it at that. Right now, we can test this out and see if everything is fine, or we need to adjust anything before we continue. So let's validate this. It says the copy data table is required for copy activity. Okay, let's see. Why is table required for copy activity? So let's see, we have the source, which is passed in here. We have it here, but in our SQL table, let's see what we have. We have the schema as well as the parameters sitting here. So I think we need to feed in the table here. So instead of selecting this, we need to pass in the parameters as our schema name. I'll be selecting the enter manually, and then we can pass in the schema name as well as the table name manually. Okay, as a dynamic content rather. Okay, I'll select this, and this should be good. So we should go back into our copy data and validate again. Excellent. So everything is fine right now, and we can test. Let's see if everything is fine, and then we can debug. Okay, let's debug this and see if there's any error before continuing. Okay, so it recognized that you can see we have multiple copy data in here. And once the data comes in here, you can see the output here. You'll see the table catalog, table schema, table name, table type, and each of the tables are here. So we don't have to hard code any of the tables or have that replicated multiple times. And beautifully, you can see each of the copy data is completed successfully, and you can see the data written is 35 kilobytes, the number of rows for that. And each of them has separate records. So this is 847 records. So let's double check that in our storage account, okay, to see if everything is working as expected. I'll just duplicate this, and we can go into our base directory and search for a storage account. Okay, I'm in ADF, so this is ADF Studio. So I'll just portal.azure there. Okay, I'll just go to the home page. Now I'll be selecting the storage account, and yeah, we can go into the medallion storage account, select the container, and in our bronze, let's see if we have data in there. Okay, so no data is in here, so something is wrong. Okay, even though our copy data is successful, but it's not writing that to, it's not writing it to a file. So let's see why. So we have our copy data in here. So if I select this and we have the activity, so it's fetching all of this output data. And if you go into the copy data, the sync, we have the table schema and the table name. Okay, let's see why this is not working as expected. So if I refresh this, I'm supposed to have data in this container. But it's actually created, but it's inside the wrong directory. If you look at what we have right now, we have this here, and you can see all of them sitting pretty nicely here. So let's restructure the where the data is sitting in, and we can fix that. So we created a new storage account for that, but we don't, you created a new folder for that, but that's not what we want. We want to put it inside the bronze. So let's go back in here, and in our Apache file output, so the file system, we need to put that as our file, our container name, which is going to be the bronze, the current one that we have right now. That's what is missing. I don't know how I missed this, but it's interesting. Okay, so now going back in here, we just have to rerun this. Just rerun this, and then to delete this one, I'll just delete this and delete it. Okay, confirm. It takes a few seconds for the pipeline run to be done, and we can continue once it is done. Now all the activities are done, and you can see if we go into the bronze layer right now, we can see the folder of the date, called the current date, and all of the tables sitting there pretty nicely. Excellent. So now at this point, we've been able to dump the data that we have in our SQL server into our bronze layer. Now, the next thing we want to do is populate this into our Databricks notebook. So that involves setting up the notebooks, connecting that to our ADF, and populating the schema and this the database in our notebook with the dynamic content that we have in our ADF. So let's quickly do that. Okay, so we can come back in here, and on our UI, I just duplicate this, and I can search for, just above here, I can search for Azure Databricks, and click on this guy. So I already have a workspace, but what I'm going to be doing is creating a new one. All right, so I'll be selecting the resource group, the medallion Spark, and the workspace name is going to be the medallion Spark Databricks. Okay, still UK South. I'll be selecting the standard, and select networking, encryption, leave it at that, compliance, tags like that. Okay, and I'll just review and create. Takes a few seconds to be done, and I'll create a new one. Okay. The resource deployment is complete, and we can click on this to go to the resource. Now we are in the Databricks environment. I just need to launch the workspace. So it automatically logs me into the Databricks environment, or the Databricks studio, if you like. And we have access to this. Now, good. Now, the first thing we want to do is create a workspace. So right now, we don't have a workspace. So I can create a new workspace or use this current one that we have. But I prefer to create a folder just in here. So I can just create a folder, and I'll call this my workspace. Okay, let's say medallion workspace. Medallion workspace. All right, and I click on create. Now, if you like, you can put this under a particular user or into the share folder. I just leave it into the root directory just for simplicity's sake. Now, once this is done, any notebook that we are creating is going to be sitting here. So I'll just right click in here, create notebook, and I'll call this, I'll change the name to, let's say, base base notebook. Now with this base notebook, we are going to be writing some scripts and queries in here. But before we do that, we need to set up something called secrets. Okay, not so many people know how to do this. So, but if you want to add a secret, you just need to add an hash key in here and call this scopes and create secret. Okay, and this should I think is scope, or did I miss it? I think it's secret. Let me see. Secret create scope. I guess that's secret / create scope. All right. Now this is where we need to connect our Databricks to our ADF. Okay. So we need to get the DNS name that we're using and the resource ID that we're using for our Databricks into this guy, so we can, automatically access the keys, and we can use that to access our medallion information in here. So to do that, we just need to establish a relationship between our Key Vault and our Databricks. So we have a Key Vault that has been created already, which is currently sitting here. If you go to the Key Vault, we have our medallion Spark Key Vault. So let's put data into our Key Vault and let's see how that works. So I can come into the secrets in here, and I'll create a new one, generate a new one. So the man is going to be manual anyways. Now the secret is going to be the name and the secret value. So the secret value that we're going to be putting inside here, the key that will be used to access our bronze, our storage account, in short. Okay, so basically I go into this guy, and in our storage account, medallion storage account here, I just need to come into the access keys. Okay, and I'll click on show, and I can copy this. Now don't worry, I'll just rotate this key once it is done. But basically you come into the access key here and get the access key, and that is what you use to create a secret as a secret value here. And you can call the name, let's say storage account key. Okay, and the content type is going to be optional. You leave the rest as it is. There is no expiration date. If you want, you can set it, but I'll just leave it at that. Now you have a storage account key in here that you can use, just in case you have some challenges with maybe listing the records, or whatever. If you are not able to see the storage account key that is created, all you just have to do is come back to the access configuration in here, and activate the access policy, and go to the access policy, add your user as a user to this particular access policy, which is currently here. Okay, if you do that, you should be able to access all of the records in there. But as it is, we just leave it at that with the storage account key created. Okay, now I have my storage account key, my Key Vault. So we need to get this Key Vault information into our Databricks. Okay, how do we do that? We go into properties here as our Key Vault. I'll copy the vault URI, and I'll go into my Databricks, and the URI is going to be the DNS name. Okay, and I'll come back again, not this one. Yeah, I'll copy the resource ID, which is currently here, and I'm going to be pasting it here. All right, then once that is done, I just need to give it a particular scope name. It doesn't matter what I give it, but you should also have the name or whatever it is you give to it in mind. So I'll call this Databricks scope, if you like, and I'll create. Now it says the premium tier is disabled in this workspace. Secret scope can only be created with initial managed principal user. So all you just need to do, that big grammar, just change this to all users, and you can create. Okay. Now the secret scope has been created, and I click on OK. Now once this is done, you can go back into your base notebook to confirm if this has been correctly initialized and all. Okay, so to do that, you just go into the workspace, You just go into the workspace in here and just do the dbutils.fs.mount. You need to mount all of our storage accounts into this for it to work. So we have our source. It's going to be, I'll just copy this so that I don't make mistakes. Just copy that and change the name to Bronze and change the storage account name to medallion SA. I'll change this as well to that, and then change the key, which is what I have in here as my Databricks scope. And I just need to get the key name, which is the key inside our medallion key vault. I mean, in the secret key here, I just need to get this storage account key. Okay. And we can confirm if this has successfully, if we've been able to successfully mount this, we should be able to, yeah, we haven't created a compute. So let's create a compute. Okay. To create a compute, we can just come in here and go to compute to create a cluster. So I'm going to have a single node. Okay. A single node is going to have 14.0 as my Databricks runtime, and I'll be using the standard DS3 version 2 as my node type, and I'll leave the rest as it is. I'll leave the rest as it is as click on create compute. It takes a few seconds for the compute to be created, and we can continue once that is done. While this is going on, we can go into our notebook and talk through what we have in our base notebook. Okay, so what I'm doing basically, we have two base notebooks right now. So what I'm doing basically is to mount whatever we have in our Bronze on our medallion storage account into this mounting point, which is MNT Bronze. Okay, so once we've been able to connect successfully to our storage account using this key that is stored in our storage key in the key vault, once that is done successfully, we can access that in the MNT Bronze, and we should be able to see every content of our medallion storage account from these dbutils. Okay, so once this is, I think it's still creating, we just wait a few more seconds. All right, so the compute creation is done. We can go back into our notebook and double check this. So if you run this, if there's any error, we should be able to see here, or if there's none, I guess everything is fine. All right, so you can see true. That means it's able to connect successfully to our storage account. Now, if I want to see what we have in our storage account, I just need to do fs list, and we can go into our mount for Bronze, MNT Bronze, and we should be able to see that you can see we have 2023 1217 and the name of this directory. So if you go into this directory, let's say 20, I'll just copy this and paste this here, and I run this again. You can see all of the records in here: address, customer, address, product category, and the rest. That means our connection to our storage account is successful and is working as expected. Perfect. So right now we need to mount in our silver and gold as well. So we just need to copy this a couple of times, change this to silver, and change this as well to silver. Yeah, and this one to gold, and this to gold. I just need to run this again, but because I've already mounted our Bronze, we need to comment that out and run this again. So we should have access to silver and the gold. Okay, perfect. So we have our Bronze, And if you go into the silver, you should be able to see what we have in the silver. Nothing in the silver yet. Silver, not silver. Okay, you probably saw that. I'll just remount, I'll comment this and remount the silver. Okay, and run this again. Now it's okay. And if you go into the gold, we don't have anything in there. So we have everything fine. So far we can see an empty array. That means the connection is successful and we are good to go. Right now, I just need to delete this. Okay, I'll delete this. I'll leave this in a script section once we are done. So in case you want to use the same code, and you can just copy this and use it in your own project as well. Now, once this is done, we can test something out as well before we continue, because this is where we are going to be putting all of this into play. So I just need to don't show, confirm. I just wanted to delete that. Okay. So what I want to do basically is to double check if we can create a database. I'll just say spark.sql and I'll say create database. I'll call it testing. And if we are able to create this database, that means we are ready to run our connections and scripts. So let's double check this in our catalog. It says it's successful, and you can see we have a testing database. So that means our catalog is fine. By the time we run our queries, we should be able to see all of them. So I just need to drop it again and we're good. Okay, perfect. So at this point, the connection between our Databricks and the storage account has been established. We've also been able to run our queries to create a new database on our catalog on Databricks. Now, what we want to do is, once we dump data into our bronze layer, we want to use those files to create tables and the database in our storage account. Well, not a storage account per se, on our Databricks, on our DB. So we have a customer parquet file in our bronze layer. We want to use that to create a customer table on our Databricks account, if that makes sense. So that's what we want to do basically. So for that, we need to initially have a script that is going to automatically recognize the database. If it has not been created before, create it. But if it has been created, skip the creation of the database, and as well as the table. So if you run it multiple times, it should only create once. The simple query is create if not exist, or create creative not exist for the database, and maybe creative not exist as well for the tables if you want. So but that's basically the script that is going to be helping us to do that. So let's quickly go into that and continue. Okay, so I'll just remove all of this, and we're going to be using the base notebook. Okay, but before we do that, let's establish a connection between our Databricks and our data frame. Data factory, not data frame. Okay, so in here, I'll just create a plus, and I'll select notebook here. Now the notebook needs to be configured. We need to be able to configure this. I'll minimize this, and I'll minimize this guy as well. Okay, now in our notebook, I just need to come into the Azure Databricks here. We don't have any linked service for our Databricks, so let's create one. So we leave that as Azure Databricks. If you like, you can change the name. Now I'll come back in here for my auto-resolve integration. I'll leave it as it is. But instead of, from the Azure subscription, you can use this, but I think I'll prefer to enter the connections manually. So right now, for my workspace URL, I can come into my base notebook here and copy everything from .NET to the starting point. I don't need the storage account keys for now. Maybe I'll just leave it as it is. Now, going back here, where are we? Yeah, in our data factory, I'll paste this here as my workspace URL. Now, I'll be using access token to connect from our data factory to Databricks. To do that, that will take us to the user settings. You go into the developer profile and select the access token to generate a new token. I'll call this ADFF. In fact, I'll call this medallion ADF Databricks. Okay, and maybe I'll just use 30 days. Well, This is going to be deleted once the video is released anyway, so it's fine. So I'll just copy this token and go back into my data factory and paste this in here. So that's the first thing. Once that is done, it automatically scans through what we have. But this is very important because I made this mistake earlier. So if you select a new job cluster, you have to be sure that you have enough compute. Maybe you have a pay-as-you-go account and you want it to be like each time the job is running, you spin up a new cluster. I don't think that is the best approach, but in some cases when you have very huge processing to be done, you might want to spin up individual processing, and I will explain why I'm using this. So if you have a single something like myself, if you have a limited constraint on the number of computes that you can use, it is best that you just select the existing compute that is running on your system and run whatever job on that particular compute. But in some cases, when you're in a production environment, you want to spin up a new cluster. But mind you, once that is done, it automatically spins down. But it costs, to spin up heavy, huge workload in production. So I'll be selecting the existing cluster, and then we use that. So I'll be selecting the existing interactive cluster, and right now this should automatically populate what we have in there. So let's see, I'll just remove this and I remove the backslash from there, and in our access token existing interactive clusters, we should be able to see so let's see what we have in here. Let's see. Existing pool. This should be automatically populated. I don't know why it is not. So what I'm going to do is discard the changes in here and try to, okay, I'll leave it at that, and maybe try to set it up again. And then I'll just click on this and go into the notebooks and select new again. I'll be selecting the auto resolve, enter manually, and I'll paste in our token. Then the Databricks URL. What I'm going to do is I'll just keep the token here, and in our Databricks, I'll copy the URL from here and I'll paste it here. And I believe this should automatically load. Yeah, so this is the new job cluster, but that's not what we want. What we want is the existing job cluster that is currently running, which is this Mujib Ganius cluster. So this is very tricky. I think it's probably something that needs to be improved on. So the first time it wasn't loading the cluster that is currently running. I just need to close the current pop-up and then reopen it. Once that is done, it's loaded the cluster. So you might want to double check. If you didn't see it at first, that's how best to close the pop-up and then create a new one. Once you select the Mujib Ganius cluster and you test it out, you can see connection successful. I'm going to be selecting the create. So that means once this is done, I just quickly talk through that. Once this is done and you submit a job, any job that is running on our ADF is going to be submitted to this cluster using the submit API. Okay, so that's what is going to be happening there. So, but what we want to do basically is we want to have a notebook path that is going to be triggered once we submit a job to that. So I'll be selecting this, and in our root folder I have a medallion workspace, and in my medallion workspace I have a base notebook. This is where we are this is the notebook that will be triggered once we submit a job to this particular notebook cluster. Okay, so we need to pass in some parameters to this so we know the parameters that are going to be accessed by this notebook. So I'll be adding 3 in here. So the first one is going to be the schema name, which is the table schema, and I'll add the file name. I'll call this the file name, as well as okay, I need to add the table name, and I need to add the file name. Okay, file name. Now for the dynamic content, since this is a parameter, so I just need to we are still inside a for each loop, don't forget. So we can just pass in the table schema here. Okay. And for the table name, I pass in the .table name. And the file name, I just need to get the file name. And this is going to be automatically populated using the format query that we had earlier, which is the UTC now. You can use any other name that you want, if that's what you prefer. I'll use it the year, month, and day. Okay. Once that is done, I just click on OK, and we should be able to trigger whatever it is in this base notebook. So let's populate what will be triggered by the time we submit a job to this particular notebook. Now, this is a script that I got online. I'll just fine tune it for us to be able to work with that. Okay. So I'm going to be using I'll be getting the file name, which is going to be gotten from the DB utils, the widgets, and I'll get this from the file name. Okay, which is what we have here. This guy, the file name. We do the same for the table name as well as the table schema. Okay, we come back in here. I'll just copy this and replicate it multiple times. We have the table schema, and we have the table name. Maybe I'll just stick to table schema, table name. If you like, you can use the underscore. It doesn't really matter. So I'll just table schema and the table name, because it's a variable name. I just want something that will be a little bit different. Now we just need to create a database if it doesn't exist. So create database if it doesn't exist. Okay. What we just do is spark.sql, and this is going to be create database, just like we did earlier, if not exist, and the schema of that particular database is going to be the same as the database name. So I'll call this table schema. Okay, table schema. All right. Now, once the database is created, we want to create the table. If it is not existing on the database, let's create it. So if the table is not existing on the database, let's create it. Okay. So to do that, we just have spark.sql, and we can have our query in here. I'll use this, and this is going to be something like this. We can put in our query here. We can say create table if not exist. Okay. Now the table schema that we're going to be passing to this is going to be, I'll just terminate that, and plus. We have the table schema, and then dot table name. So that would be more like a dot in here, and then we had a table name in here, and this should give us the more like something like this: create table if not exist. So let's say we have the medallion as a schema name, medallion schema dot table name, something like this is what this is going to be creating, as well as we're going to be using the package that we dumped in our bronze directory. We have the package is package. Then the location of the package is inside the mount section, which is the MNT. We now have access to that. Don't forget, we have access to the bronze layer, and we can pass in the package, which is going to be dot package. Okay, that's our file name, but we need to get in the schema name and the schema name, the table name as well. Okay, so I'll just this is supposed to be 3. I'll just copy this. All right, in our bronze layer here, I'll just pass in the bronze. I'll pass in the file path, which is the file name. Okay. And this is, instead of dots, we have the file name. In fact, I'll just leave this one as it is, and I'll just add a new one. Yeah, I'll just add a new one here. And the new one here is going to be the file path, which is the file name. Okay. We can have /. So this is going to be bronze. In fact, I'll just let me just copy this because it looks like I might make a mistake at that point. Yeah. Okay. So this is mounting onto bronze, the file name, the table schema, as well as the table name. Okay. So let's see if we are missing anything. I just need to maybe replace this entire section to avoid making errors. Okay. Just, yeah. So what is it doing is the table, if it doesn't exist, the table schema, the table name, and is mounting that into bronze, the table schema, table name, as well as the file name, of course, as the root directory, which is the year, month, and day that we formatted earlier, and dumping that as a package. To use that, it's going to use this to create a table. Okay. So that's what it's doing basically, and that's all we need to do. All we just had to do is trigger the pipeline at this point to see if everything is working as expected. Okay, I just save this and I can go back into my data factory and run this again. Okay, if everything is working, we have the base notebook, we have the parameters that are going in there, and we can try and run this. If there's any error, we fix. But for now, everything seems to be fine. So let's see if everything is okay. Okay, so it's loading the data right now. Okay, yes, it's dumping them to a bronze layer. It has not reached the notebook section. Okay, so it's sending data into our notebook right now. If you want to see how this is being submitted, all you just have to do is go into the base notebook here in our Databricks, and you see in the data engineering section, you see the job runs. You will see the submitted data, submitted jobs. And if you see what is going on with any of them, it says the function has no attributes, SQL. Yeah, it shouldn't be SQL, it should be spark.sql. You probably saw that. Why didn't you tell me? Okay, let's fix that. Okay, there's an error in here. It should be spark.sql. All right. I don't know how I missed that. It was maybe I just need to rerun this again. Yeah, we just rerun that. This looks like there's another error in here. So let's see what the error is looking like. Job runs. Yeah, what's the error here again? It says name table schema is not defined. I'm no longer using the small letter. Yeah, that's the error. I just need to change this to, I need to change this to table schema and the table name, something like that. Table name and this table schema. Okay, any other thing, please tell me now before I go on and run this again. Okay, I just run this again to see. Okay, so notebook is getting submitted, and all things being equal, we shouldn't have any error this time around. Yeah, you can see all of them are successful, and Takes a few seconds to reflect here. But all of them are successful regardless. So if you go into the catalog, you will see that we have sales LT in here as our database name, and you can see address, customer address, every other thing in here. So if you check the customer information, you can see the sample data being populated using the package information that was dumped into our bronze layer, as well as the customer address. If you look at that, the address itself, look at date, product, and yeah, everything is fine, and everything is good. So what we just need to do now is proceed into our DBT section. Right now, we have completed the ADF Azure Databricks integration. We've been able to move data from our SQL using ADF and dump it into our Databricks. What we want to do right now is set up our DBT for the transformation. As I explained earlier, DBT is for the transformation layer. It's really not concerned with how data gets into the system or how data is being manipulated. The only thing that is concerned with is the manipulation of the data. So whatever data that you have in your DB can be, transformed and manipulated and saved into, other dimension and other forms. That makes sense. Okay. So let's switch over to the DBT section and continue from there. So I'll be creating a new project. I'll be using PyCharm. For some reasons, PyCharm is now my favorite IDE for Python. Okay, so but you can use any other IDEs that you like. If you prefer Visual Studio Code or any other maybe whatever IDE you like, you can just use. Okay, so right now we stick to the medallion. I'll call this DBT. I'll call this Spark Azure DBT. Okay, maybe we just leave it at that. Maybe there's no need for Azure, but who cares? I just leave it at that. Yeah, I'm using Python 3.9 anyway, so if you want to use the same thing, you should be using Python 3.9 as your Python environment. So if you like, you can change it to something more complex, maybe the latest one, 3.11. If you like, but I think to prevent any issues and errors that may occur from updation of dependencies and all that, I'll just stick to 3.9. Okay. But I think with time, all of those dependencies will be fully integrated. There'll be no errors, and also you might want to use the latest Python environment. So we just wait a few seconds for this to be instantiated, and once that is done, we can get started. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is let's get a new Python file into this. Okay, I'll just touch main.py, and let's see if we can increase the size of this IDE to 20. I hope this is okay. 20 should be good. All right, for clarity. Okay, so I just need to do a pip install DBT Databricks. Now this is going to help me bring in the dependency of Databricks and DBT all point together and wired up into my system. So that's the first thing that I need to do. So once this is done, I need to do one other thing before continuing. Okay, I need to ensure that my system can connect successfully to DBT, to Databricks. And how do I do that? I use the package that has been released by the Databricks team. So I'll be using pip install. The name of the package is Databricks CLI. Okay, so I'll just install that as well. And this is going to allow me to have access to Databricks from my system. Now, once this is done, I'm just waiting for the indexing to be done because it slows down once it's still in progress. Okay, just wait a few seconds. Now the indexing is done. The next thing that I want to do is configure my Databricks on my local system. So I want to ensure that my system can effectively connect to Databricks that I have on the cloud. Okay, to do that, I just need to do Databricks configure, and I need to pass in the flag of token. Now, this is where the host is going to be. So the host of my Databricks is this guy. Okay, this guy here. This is my host, my Databricks host, without the the forward slash. All right. Now the token was the one that I created earlier that I pasted here. I'll just use this token here and I'll paste. Okay. Once I paste it, I press enter. Now we should want to test if I have access to Databricks itself or not. So Databricks, and I'll use the secret list scope. And if I'm able to see this, that means I've been able to establish a connection to my Databricks, and this is the key vault even that I created on Databricks. Now, the next thing I want to do is check if I can list the data that I have in my catalog. Okay, Databricks, and I can do FS list. Now, if I can see this, that means automatically my solution, my system is able to effectively connect to Databricks. So if you have any challenge here, you need to fix whatever error that you have before you continue, because this is a very critical point for DBT to work on your system, as well as to connect to Azure Databricks. Okay. Now, once this is done, the next thing is to do DBT init. Okay, init. So once I press enter, it's going to ask me the name of my project and all that blah 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 information. So what I want to do basically is for the project name, I'm going to have it as medallion DBT Spark. Okay, and I press enter. It said it's not a valid project name. Letters digit underscore. So I'll just have medallion underscore DBT underscore Spark. Okay. Now, which database would you like to use? I'll be using Databricks as my database. So I'll select one. Now, the next thing is going to ask me, let's see. Now it says, what's my Databricks host? My Databricks host is, let's see what we have as my Databricks host, which is this one, isn't it? .databricks.com. Yeah, that should be it. If there's any error, we fix this once we are not able to connect. Now, the HTTP path. If you want to fix this or to get this information, basically you just need to come into your compute and select your compute here, and in the advanced option you see the JDBC ODBC here. So my server host name, this is actually my server host name. I think is the same one I have here, but without the HTTPS. I'll fix that shortly. But the HTTP path is this one. I'll copy this and I'll paste it here. Now it says I'm going to desired access token option. I'll be using the use access token. Now the access token that I copied earlier is here. I'll just copy that and paste it here. I don't need to use Unity catalog. It's okay. And the schema that I'll be using, the default schema that I'll be using for this automation is this guy, sales LT. Okay, sales LT. All right. One is fine. I don't need to do that. It's okay. So final thing that I need to do is I need to bring in my profiles.yaml and fix this HTTP that I added here, because if I do DBT debug, I'm going to have a challenge. There's an error that is going to be generated at this point. So I need to fix that error. It says it is not valid. So let's fix that. Okay. To fix that, we just need to come back into my profiles.yaml in here, and it's usually here. I'll just get it here. I'll just come in here to my DBT profiles.yaml, and I'll drag that into my Python, and you can see we have the code with DBT, and this is DBT BigQuery code demo, crash course, medallion. Yeah, this guy. Now, this is saying we don't have a catalog, but we do actually. So we don't have a catalog here. The host information is wrong. I'll just remove that. And what I need to do is move this back up. I'll just move this to the top because that's what I want to work with at this point. And yeah, I'll just save this and do DBT debug again. It says there are errors with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment these people out. They are causing issues for me. DBT debug. It says profile should be none if loading profile is completed. All right. So what I'm going to do as well, I'll just remove all of this for now so I can establish connection. Then I can paste them back once this is done. You can see that the connection test is fine, but it says, what's the issue? It says medallion Spark DBT project is not found, but because I'm inside the wrong directory, so I just need to move into the medallion Spark directory and I can run DBT debug again and we should be good. All things being equal. Perfect. So everything is fine. I'm able to connect to the Databricks with this guy, which is okay. I'll just paste these guys back and I'll just leave them as they are. Okay. And in fact, I'll just comment these guys out. Okay, good. Now, going back here in my medallions DBT Spark, I have my DBT project.yaml. And right now, when I run the debug, DBT debug, I was able to successfully connect. And you can see the catalog has been resolved as I've meta store. Now, this at this point is where we need to write some SQL queries for the transformation. So I'm going to start with the snapshots to load in all of the current snapshots of the data that we have right now. If you look at our sales LT, we only have these tables. We don't have any snapshots at this moment. So we need to keep a snapshot of this current directory before transformation so we can replay all of them at any point in time we want. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my medallion Spark here, and under this snapshot, I'm going to create a new SQL file. I'll call, in fact, I'll just say touch snapshot. Each of these tables are going to be handled as snapshots separately. So I'm going to start with the address. So I'll say address.sql. I'll have snapshots again. I'll have customers.sql, and then I'm going to have, we'll just go into the snapshots directory, and I can just have touch customer address .sql. I have my product.sql. I have product category.sql, product description SQL, product model.sql. We have product model, product description.sql. We have sales order detail.sql, and we have sales order header.sql. Those are the SQLs that we are going to be creating. And if you look at the snapshots section, you can see all of them. So what I'm going to do, basically, I'll just copy paste all of these scripts. I've written them and we can just talk through each of them and what they do basically. Okay. Because it takes some time to write all of them. Okay. So I'll just paste in the address. I'll paste in the customer information, the customer as well as the customer address. I'll copy that and paste that, and we can talk through all of them. We have the product. We have the product category. I don't have that. I removed this, so I'll just use the product model. I'll leave the product description information there, and I'll just focus on these ones. Yeah. So if you like, you can, populate all of them. But for now, I'll just stick to the ones that I've been able to do. I'll remove this category and description as well as this guy as well. Okay. So right now I have address, customer address, product model, sales order details, sales order header. So, okay, let's talk through each of them. So let's start with the address. So what I'm doing basically, I thought I pasted the address. Okay, so what I'm doing basically is I'm creating a snapshot of the address snapshot as a variable name. Well, that's the name of the snapshot. Now I'm using a configuration of the file format is going to be Delta. Like I said, our silver and gold are going to be Delta, but that's not the same for our bronze. Bronze is simply Parquet. Okay. Right now we have a mounting point as a MNT silver and the address. So this is the location where the data is going to be dumped into on our what's the name? On our storage account. It just quickly escaped me. Okay, so now we have the target schema as the snapshot as the target schema. Invalidate add delete, unique ID, unique key for the address key, address ID, the strategies check, and the columns is going to be checking all of them. So what I'm doing basically is to select these columns from sales LT from address. So the address that we have in here, this guy, this address, I'm selecting, no, not this one. I'm selecting all of this information. I mean, those columns that I selected here, I'm selecting all of them and I'm selecting select star from that. That's basically, this is a CTE expression and also running this, and that's all I'm doing. And the same thing is what I'm doing for customers as well. In our snapshot, the customer address as well. We have the product, the same thing. Product model, sales order, as well as sales order details. So let me just take water. Now I'm selecting all of this information, okay, from the sales order header as well. Sales order details is exactly the same thing. It's just the column name that is different as well as the name of the snapshot. Okay. Once these are done, I think this is a good point for us to commit whatever we have here and commit into our repository on GitHub. Okay. So if you look at what we have here, we have the everything inside our snapshot. Okay. So I think I initialize the git in the root directory. Yeah, I'll just remove the .git here. It should be in the root directory. Okay, git init. And I just need to check again. So I have all of this. Good. So I just need to add my everything. I'll just add everything to the DB at this point. Okay, I don't need this main py again. So I just say GAA and commit. I'll say added snapshot. Just remove this. Added snapshot to DBT. Okay. Added snapshot to DBT. Okay. Now, once that is done, we can run this and see if everything is fine and working as expected. So just do that by running the DBT snapshot. And running DBT snapshot is going to run each of the queries that you have and see if everything is running as expected. It says snapshot depends on sales.lt.customer, which is not found. Okay. Okay. So we need to fix the models. So let's fix the models and we should be good. Okay. Now for the sales LT, actually, I'm missing one other thing here that is important. I only pasted all of this code. I haven't added the source, which is the where we recognize all of the tables and the schema that is on our Azure Databricks that we want to model on DBT. Yeah, maybe it's because I needed water then. So let's fix that. We just need to get in our YAML that is going to be recognizing all of these tables as well as the schema. Okay. To do that, we just come into our model here. We can just call this create a folder. We can call this a staging directory, or if you like, you can call it bronze, whatever it is. But basically, this is the YAML file we have. So we can say, maybe you can call this bronze.yaml. Okay. Yes, and add. So basically, in here, we are going to be having version. We have version 2 as a YAML file. So we have our sources. The name is going to be file. Let me just paste and copy paste that to save time. Okay. So basically, what we have is the name of this schema is sales LT and the scales LT schema, and its adventure works loaded into bronze, whatever description you want to give it. So right now we have address, customer address, product category, product description, product model, sales order details, and sales order header as our sources. And once this is done, you want to check if everything is fine. DBT debug. Okay, so everything is fine. Let's check if we can do DBT snapshot again. Hopefully we should be good. Yeah, you can see it's unable to do partial passing because saved manifest not found. So it's doing a full pass and running everything from the beginning. And you can see each of the snapshots are being run at this point. So we have the address snapshots being run first. So all of the 7 snapshots are going to be running. And we are in the 3 of 7. Okay. Perfect. It's completed successfully. So if you look at our sales LT right now and you refresh, you will see that we have our snapshots created, and these are the 7 tables. And if you look at each of them, they have a snapshot with addition of DBT updated, DBT XCID updated at value from and value to, right? These are important keys for us to know the changes that are happening and what time each of these record is invalidated. So for instance, if you change or remove or deleted whatever record that is here, the DBT valid to will be populated and you will see the last record valid date before it was changed. Okay, and that's one of the good thing about DBT. It keeps track of the history of each of the data, and this is our data. It's pulling data from our Apache file. Okay, so that means at this point our snapshot is fine. And if you go into our storage account, just go into the containers, and you can check in the silver section. You can see all of them sitting there pretty nicely. For our address snapshot is here. And if you look at the customer, we have the customer snapshot sitting here pretty nicely. And each of these can be used to replay, if anything changes, or whether for some reasons we lost any data in our production environment, which is maybe the gold or the silver section, we can replay whatever we have in our bronze to the silver, then to the gold, and everything will be sitting there pretty nicely. Okay, so if you have any transformation to be done, I think this is where we are going to be doing the more like the major transformation. Okay, so I'm going to be deleting this example file. I don't need it. So I just need to have in our model here, I need to add a Marts. I'll just add our Marts here. So this Mart is going to be more like a streamlined version that will be going into code. So these are going into whatever snapshots we have here are going into the silver section. And like I said, you can do any transformation in here, change the column name, merge whatever it is you want to do, but these are going into our silver section. For the ones that are going into the gold, which is the final stage in our transformation layer, we are putting them inside the Marts section. So we are going to have, for Marts, we are going to have customer Marts, customer, and let me just, make directory. We have model Marts, and we have our customer. We are going to have, okay, it already exists. We have products, and we have sales. Okay, sales. Now, the three of them are created, so we just need to create a file. So we just need to do models, Marts sales.yaml. We do for customer, and we do customer.yaml, as well as the SQL version of each of them. I just need to do for product as well, products.yaml. So we do products.sql, customer.sql, and sales.sql. Okay, so if you look at each of them, you can see we have the SQL in here. So the transformation for the SQL that is going into the gold will be inside here, but the structure and the text, which is the YAML file, just like we have in our, if you look at our snapshots here, okay, we don't have the structure here. I mean, if you look at okay, we'll create one, don't worry. We've already deleted the examples, but inside the YAML file is where we have our structure of the table and maybe the text for each of the columns that are going into the table. But inside our SQL, that's where we're going to be having the transformations that are going to be happening. Okay, so let's start with the customer. I already have this written down, and we can just quickly talk through it. Just paste this here, but I'll change the name from customer to dim customer, because that's more like if you like, you can put it like that. I'll just change this. Yeah, do a refactor, it's okay. And do a refactor for this as well. Should be dim customer. So if you like, you can write your facts table here, or you can write the dim. I'm using the dim here, but you can use whatever it is you like. For some reasons, I just left it at that. But if you like, you can, I'll just rename these two, leave the sales as it is, so we can, walk through each of them. Now, so what I'm doing here basically in our dim customer, so I just have this, and if you look at what I have in here, so this is going to be materialized as a table. That means it's being written as a table, not a view. Okay, and the file format is Delta, and the location is going to be the Mount Gold customers. Okay, that's where it's going to be written to, and this is the address snapshot. These are the context expression, the CTE that are written. So this is getting data from address, this is getting data from customer, and this is getting customer address. This is getting from customer itself. Okay, and at the end of the day, this is the transformation that is happening. This is just basically a select statement that is happening between customer snapshot, customer address, and address snapshot. I just join all of them on inner join, and select the columns. But you can adjust this and do multiple transformation. I'll just paste in the structure and the text that I have in here. I'll just paste in here, simple as that. And for the product as well, I'll copy paste that. Let's just paste the SQL and paste the structure as well for product. And I'll paste the SQL for sales. And for the sales structure as well, I'll just copy paste that in here. Good. So to just talk through this, we have the product. This is also going to be materializing as table, the data format, and is going to be written to product. So I'm selecting the product snapshot from our product snapshot that we had earlier. The model snapshot as well is going to be selected as well from there. And if you notice something here, we have the DBT valid 2. Now DBT valid 2 is showing us a new record. Okay, so far it's null, it has not changed. So but if you have multiple transformations that have been done on a particular column, maybe you've updated it, you've maybe you removed it or deleted it or whatever it is, or whatever any column of the columns have been modified, you see the valid 2 and a new record is going to be added, without the null. So we are selecting the latest one without the valid 2 information, which is the timestamp that is added at what point it was changed. Okay, that's important. Okay, so right now at the end of the day, we have our transformed section and we're selecting that. The same thing, we have the structure, and this is the structure. We have the dim product, and everything here is as it is. We have the sales as well, which is here. The same thing happens here. We are selecting the snapshots, the product, and I'm joining the header as well to the dance. And then the transformation layer, I just selected all of them and I select them as transformed, and that's basically what is happening there. All we just need to do right now is run this, and we should be able to see everything sitting down in our code section, and we can write a queries against that if that's okay. So let's do that and check. So in our terminal, we are okay. So where are we? So pwd. So we are in the medallion DBT Spark. I just need to do DBT run. Okay, but before that, I need to do a test to see if all the tests that I have written in the schemas, I mean in these YAML files, are working as expected. It says configuration parts exist in your DBT which do not apply to any resources, which is this DBT Spark example. So let's remove that. If you look at this DBT project in here, we have our example here. So we just need to change that to I'll just remove everything. You can add each of these folders. If you want them to materialize as table or view, you can add them. In case you are wondering how to change that or modify that, I have a crash course. If you check the link in the description or in the card on this video, you will see the video there that is being suggested to you. So you can watch the video and you will see how I converted the video. You see how I converted the table to view, view to tables, and how you can, work individually with the multiple nested folders inside each other. So let's not go into that. That's beyond the scope of this video, but let's leave that as it is. We just remove that. We do a test again, DBT test, and we should be good. Okay, it says it's trying to run. Yeah, because we haven't run this, so let's do a DBT run. So you can have all of this registered in the system and we can test all of them. Okay, so it's trying to run all of these tests on them, but there's no dim sales in the package itself. So it's trying to run each of them as a table. And once that is done, we can now do a test. Even though the test is being done in the background, but it is important to do that separately. So right now, we can now run our DBT test and we should be good. Okay, so it says found 3 models, 7 snapshots, and there's nothing to do. Try to check your config and the model asks. So I think everything should be okay. So let's check our UI. And if you check our catalog, in here, if I do a refresh and if you go into the sales LT section, you will see that we have dim customer, which is here, and this is the final look of how the customer looks like. The same thing with products. You see how it looks like. And you can see something like the sales end date, discontinued date, and something like that. And the last one is the sales, which is here. The sales is the sample data here. And it's crunching it here and it's done. So if you look at what it looks like, we have it like this, and that's the thumbnail photo, and each of the records are here, and the final comment. So this is how it looks like, and what am I doing? Yeah, this is how it looks like, and these are the columns, the column information, the types and all that. And if you go into the gold section at this point, I just need to go one step up into the containers. And if you go into the gold section, you have the customer, product and sales. And if you see the customer, you have the dim customer here. If you have any other transformations, they can be done via the DBT product level here, as well as the sales here. Okay, all of them are there. All right. Now, finally, the next thing we want to do is just generate the documentation, and we can view how it looks like, how the structure of the system looks like. So we just need to do DBT docs, DBT. I write it somewhere here. Just DBT docs generate, DBT docs generate. Okay, this is going to generate the documentation of whatever transformation that has been done so far. And once this is done, we just do DBT serve to view it on the UI. Okay, so it's written to this catalog.json in the target directory, and we can do DBT docs serve. Okay, and it looks like this on the UI. I'll just drag it into this, and you can see how it looks like. Okay, so this is how the documentation looks like. So we have the sources here. We have the medallion DBT Spark here, and this is the model, the Marts, the customer, the dim customer here, and this is the code. If you look at the description here, it's not documented because I didn't do so much documentation there. And these are the columns, the dependencies, which are these three guys, and this is the full code. All right. The same thing happens to the product. You will see the details here and the code here as well. The sales, you see it here, the snapshots, and you can see each of the data and who is referencing what, and each of them are being referenced. I think for the customer, if you look at this, you see the dim customer is referencing that, and it has a node of customer. Okay, and if you look at the sales IT here, which are the sources, all right, you can see each of the data and the sample SQL that are being selected. So this is selecting data from our Hive Meta Store and our Azure Databricks. The same thing with the address here. You can see it's the snapshot, and this is the query that is used there. If you look at the database, if you look at it on the database level, it looks like this. I mean, sales IT and the snapshots, which is exactly what we have in our catalog in here. Okay, the same thing we have here, sales IT, sales LT, and snapshot, the same thing, just like it is the same way here, with the exception of the additional something like this product model, product description table that wasn't added to that. So, but basically that's how it looks like. And I don't have any group models in here, but that's how you can see it on the project level as well as the database level. So if you want to view, you can see it from there. If you want to see the graph, the lineage graph for product category looks like this. But the one that is a little bit more interesting is if you look at the sales, let's look at the dim customer. Yeah, the dim customer has this graph, which is the sales LT into the address snapshot, sales customer into the customer snapshot, everything going to the dim customer. So the same way, if you want to view the sales, for instance, we have this, and it's like this. If you view screen, we have the sales order details into the snapshots. Then we have the product and the order in here, everything going into the sales. All right. So that's how the graphs look like. And what else again? I think there is another one. We have the product. Do we have an interesting graph? I think it's just a simple graph, really. We don't have anything too complex, but that's how it looks like anyways. So that's basically it. If you have any questions or comments, feedback, just drop them in the comment section. So that caps it all. That's where we are going to be stopping for our DBT. But before we continue, if you enjoyed this video and if you learned something new, please give a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the latest information. So if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe before going, and you can check other videos that are going to be listed on this UI for more information and more contents like this. All right, so thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.